The NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's $300 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. 21 plus and present in select states. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Welcome back, folks. It's Friday, Getaway Day, January 18th, 2025. Born on this date in 1853, women's suffragist and co-founder of the National Woman's Party, Alva Belmont of Mobile. Her family moved to New York, where she married a Vanderbilt and then a Belmont. And I know this isn't Alabama, but Bob Uecker died yesterday at 90 years old, and I didn't want anybody to miss that news. First of all, because especially if you heard the conversation with Brandon Gaudin, you know I'm a huge baseball broadcasting enthusiast, but also, frankly, it's easy to underestimate Uecker's cultural impact. Folks of a certain age remember Uecker's many appearances on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. He was one of those can't-miss, always entertaining guests, and that really is what made him famous. He acted in a successful 80s sitcom, Mr. Belvedere, where he played probably the only sports writer in the country who had a butler. He pretty much played himself in the greatest baseball movie of our generation, Major League.
Just a bit outside.
And here's to his role in several of those great Miller Lite commercials of the early 80s. If you watched sports programming in the 80s, you know he never made it to the front row, and he was no Whitey Ford, but he was certainly one of the most entertaining characters in American life. Today on the show, we have AL.com Director of Investigations, Challen Stevens, for what's probably our final review of 2024 segment. It was such a great year, we just can't let go. We're going to talk about 12 Alabama stories that made an impact in 2024. I'm talking about stories that got politicians to act or local officials to make a change or might have even helped nonviolent people get a fair shake at a parole hearing. First, we have news updates on breastfeeding moms at jury duty, an undocumented person who got busted voting, and more. I'm Mike Morgan, and we're down in Alabama. Recent harassment claims by women who bring their breastfeeding babies to jury duty has led to work on a bill that would excuse nursing mothers from that civic duty, reports AL.com's Heather Gant. Heather reported a story just this week that a mom said she was told to make other arrangements for her child. She said that when she replied that leaving her breastfeeding baby was not an option, a judge raised the possibility of involving DHR. State Representative Susan DuBose, a Hoover Republican, said that woman's story motivated her to work on a bill she said she'll pre-file before the legislative session. Currently, there's nothing in Alabama law to exempt nursing moms from jury duty, said DuBose, quote, "A mother shouldn't be relying on a subjective, sympathetic judge to determine whether she can feed her baby or not." A Guatemalan national in Russellville faces 4 years in prison after she voted in at least 4 elections in Alabama, reports AL.com's Carol Robinson. The woman's been in the U.S. illegally since 2008. A few years later, she used another woman's identity to acquire a passport so she could travel to and from Guatemala. One might suggest that the best thing to do in that situation is to keep as low a profile as possible. But U.S. politics are quite the temptation. In 2016, the woman started voting. She voted in the 2016 and 2020 primaries and general elections. She was arrested and pleaded guilty in September to 2 counts of false claims of citizenship in connection with voting, 1 count of false statements in application for a U.S. passport, 5 counts of use of a U.S. passport obtained by false statements, and 1 count of aggravated identity theft. Northern District of Alabama U.S. Attorney Prim Escalona said the Senate sends a message to would-be illegal voters. Quote, maintaining the sanctity of the U.S. election system is one of the most important responsibilities of federal law enforcement, end quote. Well, here's our list of the day telling us how awful it is to live in Alabama, which might be useful information for the professionals flooding into North Alabama and the middle-aged Californians filling up new homes in Baldwin County. I mean, what are y'all thinking? AL.com's Shauna Stewart reports that the Senior Living Service Seniorly ranked Alabama 50th among the states in Washington, D.C. on its best states to retire in 2025 list. That's 50 out of 51. Georgia and Mississippi are down there with us. New Jersey is the only state that ranked worse. Seniorly used 9 data metrics, including cost of living, income taxes, weather, entertainment, availability of doctors, long-term care spending, and overall health issues. Now, like on many such lists, what it boils down to here is that Alabama gets dinged because its people have less wealth, health care funding is low, and we trend poorly on health issues. At the other end of the list, we find Seniorly's pick for the best retirement destination. The winner, Washington, D.C. We're going to take a quick break, listen to some advertising that'll probably help pay for our new retirement home in D.C. When we come back, we're going to talk with AL.com Director of Investigations, Challen Stevens, on 12 Alabama stories that made an impact in 2024. Y'all stay with us. Thanks, everybody, for staying with us. We have been spending a few episodes lately talking about 2024 and the biggest news stories. Mostly we've done politics and sports, which are so near and dear to our hearts, not necessarily in that order. I really wanted to get on the show Challen Stevens. He's the Director of Investigations for Advance Local. That's AL.com's company. And his team just do incredible work, and it's what we call journalism with a big J. The watchdog folks who are digging deep on some of the stories inside the stories. Challen, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thanks, Ike. It's good to be here.
Let's kind of go over 2024. What were some of the big stories? I'm thinking of one in particular. I'll go ahead and prompt you on this. I won't steal all your thunder for all of them, but Ivana Hrynkiw has been on the show a couple of times.
She had a good year. Well, I'll start by saying there's a lot of different forms of success in journalism. I mean, we do a lot of good work at AL.com that informs people, and we do work that entertains people, and that gets read in a big way and goes out nationally. But sometimes we do work that just gets out into the world and makes things happen. Stories that change lives or change laws or launch investigations or lead to academic studies, that sort of thing. And these are 12 of those stories in 2024 that had impact. And sometimes that's as simple as leading the conversation among other media. And that would be number 12 there. Ivana started the year last year with reporting on the first execution by nitrogen hypoxia in the nation. And this was condemned by the Vatican and the UN, and there were all sorts of reporters descended on Alabama, and only 3 people could witness it. Ivana was one of those three media representatives, and she became the pool person, and she became the spokesperson for what happened in there. The AL.com was the main witness for international coverage.
And this is all people really have to go on, is the reporter giving a firsthand account of what they witness.
That's right. Since nobody had done this, it wasn't really clear what would happen. And so Ivana and the other 2 reporters who were in there were the only ones to just sort of watch and see what this new process looked like. And so there was a lot of other press there outside the facility, and they had to rely on Ivana's version. And we did see some, there was some struggling, but Alabama has a long and difficult history with executions, and she's seen many others, and this was not the worst or
Yeah.
the best. So
Yeah, and it's no, so new that each one has been a little different. They're trying to pick up on patterns, and it's kind of crazy. It's a such a morbid way,
it is a morbid way to lead the nation in testing something out, but this is what Alabama's up to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we just covered the news.
And yeah, and she's done a great job of just literally describing what she sees, which is that's what we do. Tell me about the story that Hannah Denham did about the dash cam that turned into a really costly night for Birmingham.
Well, this settlement has been revised down, but at the time, Birmingham lost a suit for over a police chase and a shooting. They lost a $4.5 million jury verdict. That's been revised down. I believe we're down below $1 million now, something like 750,000. But at the time, this whole case had worked through the courts forever, and no one had ever seen the video to realize what was behind this very costly verdict. Hannah got the judge to release the video, which then led to other media covering a case that had been largely ignored. You know how it is. Until you can see the video, people are not going to pay attention. But this allowed everybody to judge for themselves what they thought of this shooting.
Now, part of investigative journalism is column writing, and I know that people understand. Hey, your opinions are best kept on the opinion page, and straight news. You don't have an opinion, but good columnists report as well, right? They're not just writing from on high. And you had a couple of pieces from Kyle Whitmire in the on your list of 12.
Yeah, Kyle's got a good sense for news and finding stories that matter and can make a difference, and we call it a reported commentary. So he's still got the freedom to use his voice, but he doesn't have any freedom with the facts, and he does the reporting on some of these columns. And on this one, this was pretty simple. He just this was more commentary, where he singled out Randall Woodfin, the mayor of Birmingham, for responding to the Hush shooting by focusing on another lawmaker and issuing a meme. And Kyle wrote a column saying that Birmingham's hurting and they need answers, they don't need memes. And Woodfin apologized pretty quickly. So that's just an example of local journalism, making a quick difference.
And I like asking the question and getting to the point quickly, writing that column and getting it out there instead of it festering on social media. And then, I guess we're the news. We have to respond to this eventually. It was taken care of. They debated for a few hours, and we got to move on about this shooting to more pressing parts of it.
Right, to focus on who did it, how it happened, and we move past this political moment.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think, are we counting up or counting down here? I think we're counting down, right?
We're counting down.
So we're at number 9.
Yeah, these were impactful stories, but these were stories that mostly just drove conversation. But then eventually we started to get into stories that actually influence policy. And so that's usually stories that are unique. Those are stories where AL.com was the only one who had the scoop, and it was important enough that there was some fallout. And so at number 9, you have Savannah Trians Fernandez, who did a story. This is a story she did before 2024, looking at student discipline and disparities by race and due process for Black students in Alabama. And she focused on one student who had been removed from school for marijuana, although he says it wasn't his, and the school gave him no opportunity to dispute that. He said, anyway, eventually that story led to him being invited to address the UN, which he did. And then in 2024, it led to Illinois State opening up a study on discipline disparities in Alabama. So that's a very direct way where the reporting had impact. Now this issue is being studied. Then we'll see what actually they find, and we'll report on that, and it could lead to change.
All the way to the UN, and it started with a story.
All the way to UN. He and his father went to, I believe it was Switzerland where they spoke. It wasn't in New York. It was some kind of meeting over there.
Well, give me number 8.
Number 8 is Greg Garrison, longtime reporter, veteran of the Birmingham News, who was looking into a case in the Shoals about a suspicious hanging, a man who was found dead, and his family said that he was in a dispute with the police there, with the deputies, and they didn't believe it was a hanging. It's not really clear what happened here, but after Greg wrote about this story suddenly was copied everywhere, and the sheriff up there just called for an FBI investigation to clear it up. So the story pretty directly led to an FBI investigation, and hopefully we'll get some answers on what exactly happened.
Yeah, this hasn't been that long ago, has it? The investigation is
No.
still in the early stages, probably.
No, we don't know, and yeah, we haven't heard, so that's still ongoing.
I was going to say, Greg's been on the show before, as has the name in number 7.
Number 7, yeah. This was the Ed Lab and Trish Crane, and this was really, I enjoyed this story as a former education reporter, but Trish basically kept the state honest. There's a lot going on in Alabama with third grade reading scores. We're putting a lot of weight on the cutoff score and whether you can read on grade level, whether you can graduate. There's been a lot of debate, and the state came out and said that 91% of third graders could read on grade level. Well, Trish dug into the numbers, which is something she's really quite good at, and she found that they had slid the score. They moved the benchmark on what it actually meant to pass the test, and if you were really just doing grade level, only 77% were on grade level. And so this is a direct effect where, like, if she didn't look at this story would have never gotten out, and everybody would have accepted the 91%. So she's keeping the state honest here, and that changes the story. So that helped everybody understand what was actually happening with this test.
Yeah, it definitely changes the story, and a big story too. And it can affect, whether kids graduate on time.
Yeah, it can affect your student. It can affect students at schools all over the state. So it's got some wide-ranging implications. It's high stakes whether you get to graduate or not.
Yeah, I'd say.
Number 6 is, he's a new reporter. Coyote Crown joined us not too long ago. He's up in Huntsville, and he's got a pretty good nose for news and has done some stories that have had immediate impact. These are local stories. But sometimes when you're doing a really local story, you can just focus on some narrow issue and everybody can quickly reach a consensus that, oh yeah, maybe we don't like that plan. And on this one, he focused on a shelter in Limestone County, and there was a call for financial reasons to alter the way it handled strays, which would have resulted in putting down more strays in a faster way. The shelter folks said that would have caused them to close. They didn't want to do it. There was an immediate discussion. Policies were changed. The shelter stayed open. And a lot of animals got adopted. So it was a very direct effect. It's kind of a happy one.
Yeah, definitely. And at number 5, you have one we've carried on this program a few times, but give us the update from Maggie Cates.
This is 5 years out on chicken plant spill on the Mulberry Fork off the Warrior River. Maggie just went to go take a look what had happened with the Tyson spill, and she found the fish hadn't come back, not in sizable numbers. But what she also found was there were a bunch of promised repairs, and they hadn't happened. And after she ran the story, work began immediately, and she got a bunch of texts from the homeowners saying the attention had prompted the long promised work to begin. So that's just direct result.
Yeah, that's classic journalism making a difference right there in people's backyards, literally.
Yeah, something that means a whole lot to a few people. It's not a huge group of people, but it's direct effect on their lives.
Yeah, and some of these local stories, because this is a statewide podcast, so typically I'm looking for a lot of statewide stuff. But like you said about Coyote's story on the pets and the animal shelter, there are trends that you could be anywhere in the South, or the country, and make them interesting stories. And when we pick them up, that's why these are on the list.
Absolutely. Well, here we go at number 4, counting down. Back to Kyle Whitmire, but this one was Kyle has long kept an eye on the state legislature, so these are real state stories for Alabama. And he ran a headline in April that was "Feed Poor Kids?" Alabama lawmakers fatten slush fund instead. This was about a summer meal program for eligible students. and the state didn't have the money to fund the program. And when he focused on where the money was, where they found money to use on their own slush fund, 6 days later they suddenly found the 10 million for the summer meal program. So that was sometimes somebody just needs to go down and pay attention to what they're doing in Montgomery, and you can have immediate results.
That happened really fast. You have these things where you write about it and then people debate it and it carries on. And then there are other times when you call something out and lawmakers are like, "What are we doing?" I think that's one of these
Yeah.
times.
I'm sure they did not enjoy the slush fund headline. That's a good way to get lawmakers' attention.
Joseph Bryant was on the show to talk about this next story.
This is Joseph Bryant in Birmingham. He's a longtime reporter, veteran reporter. Has really taken an interest in the goings on in Tarrant, which are too many to get into here. The disputes are endless there. But at one point, there was a town critic, a 79-year-old woman who was arrested and charged with harassment and disorderly conduct for touching the hand of the town accountant during some kind of verbal exchange. She maybe touched her hand. Joseph, a lot of people didn't even notice this happened. She wasn't arrested on the spot. There was a warrant issued. Joseph paid attention to it. When he wrote a big story about this, then suddenly a lawyer stepped forward to represent the woman. There was a resounding acquittal. The judge was pretty forceful. And then the woman was not only acquitted, she was put on a town committee. So he kind of changed. It's one person's life, but he really changed this woman's life. She was looking at jail time.
Yeah. You can't. There's too much going on in Tarrant to unpack it all in less than 2 or 3 hours.
Yes. And you'd have to have Joseph here to walk us through.
And we did. We could have talked all day. I think we spent 30 minutes talking about what we talked about then, and this is an entirely different arm of all the problems that they've been having there. Well, give us number 2.
Number 2 is Sarah White's Kotichek, who's been following for a couple of years the bizarre saga of Alabama and its woeful unemployment system, which was slow to refund people, slow not to refund, but to pay people unemployment during the pandemic. A lot of people might remember the long lines and the inability to get anybody on the phone. Well, years later, confusion remains, and there were a lot of calls for repayment. The state coming in, asking people for the money they paid them during the lockdown, asking them to repay it, asking some people we found who really don't have any money to repay them years later. And each time she focused on a person's case, this seemed to work itself out. Suddenly the people would get, we can't say that they read the story, but a couple days later, they get a call from the state saying, "We fixed your case and you no longer owe us any money." And in 1 or 2 cases, the state even awarded them some money, said, "We actually owe you some money." So this was really just helping people. And this is an ongoing story. And if anybody's listening to this and is still struggling with demands to repay unemployment, please contact Sarah White's Kotichek. She's still following this. This case continues. It went before the Supreme Court last year, and we're waiting on that ruling now.
Yeah, Sarah was on the show after she went up to the Supreme Court, and I will put her contact information in show notes so people can check that out. Yeah, thanks for doing that.
Okay. And number 1, our most impactful story in 2024, and this really had just a whole host of impact in terms of the way it changed how certain things were happening in this state, was our series on Denied and Alabama's broken parole system. For anybody who hadn't encountered any of this, Alabama in 2023 had only paroled 8% of the eligible people, the eligible prisoners. If you go back before 2017, that was, well above 50%, but for some reason we just stopped paroling almost everybody. Immediately after we focused on this board, people started getting out again. It didn't go all the way back up to where it used to be, but it did go up to 20%. And we're talking about people that we're not talking about, nobody's arguing to put out violent, dangerous inmates. We're talking about people who we let the audience encounter them and decide for themselves what did they think of somebody who was in prison because they missed a meeting when they were out on parole, and then they were sent back to finish their life sentence, or they had shoplifted at Lowe's, or they'd grown marijuana. Then they had a lot of them were in there for 3 strikes laws that we don't even have anymore. And we also dug into how it all works and how these people do not really get time to plead their case. In fact, they don't even get to attend their parole hearings. If they have a representative, they get a couple minutes to speak. And as we dug into it, some lawyers came forward and took on cases. Some money came in. People from both parties, lawmakers from both parties, got pretty incensed. Both in the state house, they took a great interest in this. Why was nobody getting out of the parole system? And 2 former Supreme Court justices, Chief Justices, Sue Bell Cobb and Roy Moore, separately both went down and had long arguments with the parole board over cases where they thought people should be getting out. So this was, in Alabama, it's not hard to find issues that cut across the aisle. We have a lot of areas that need improvement. And this is one of those where it was just not a Democrat or a Republican issue. It was just everybody was trying to figure out why in an overcrowded, dangerous system we were keeping everybody in to the maximum time allowable. In the end, the difference between 8% of people getting out and about 20% of people getting out in 2024 means about 250 more people got out of prison, were paroled. And these are, largely nonviolent. It's kind of a difficult word because Alabama categorizes certain crimes as nonviolent that are not or violent or nonviolent in a weird way. But let's just say these are people who did not harm anybody. Right. They didn't injure anybody. A lot of them were already out there on work release, working at Dairy King, Dairy Queen, and Burger King, working at McDonald's and warehouses and working for local governments. So
yeah, I thought y'all did a great job of Ivana did a great job and thanks to you also for just for planning to go big on this, the scope of it to give it the hours that it needs, because if you tell somebody, well, only 9% of people or 8% of people are making parole, I believe a lot of people out there think, well, they were given these sentences, they need to serve them. But when you start telling the stories, and we and Ivana told so many of these stories that are ridiculous.
So many. We just let people read the stories if they wanted, and they could decide for themselves whether they thought this was right to deny parole or not. And we had cases where the victim's family was down there asking that the person be let out, and the board would still deny it. It's just, we did find some very interesting stories, and it was quite eye-opening to mix the statistics with the personal stories. Like you said, not just relying on anecdotes, but using the data and taking a look at how the whole program was working, and then letting people decide as though they were on the parole board. How would they vote?
Right. That's exactly right. I wanted to ask you while you were here, because this list is so impressive, and the work you've done. I mean, we're just thankful to have great journalists like Challen Stevens around.
Yeah, I'd also like to thank my fellow investigative editor, Ashley Remkes. Couldn't do all this without her.
Absolutely. Yeah, we love Ashley. When I came up in journalism, I always worked the copy desks and did not ever have any reporting beat jobs. So I never developed any interview skills. And now I interview people for a podcast. When are you going to coach me? When are you going to coach me to get the best out of some of these folks who come on the show?
No, you're doing a great job. You keep your interviews friendly and you keep them going, and then they're just perfect, Ike. I would have never known that if you hadn't told me.
See, I need to glean all the skills I can off folks who are here. Tell me now a little bit on the personal side. We're all over the place now, which is great. Media outlets now, they work remotely. They can be, you're a little more spry when you do that. Are you still living in the Huntsville area? Is that where you're based?
I am. I spent a good bit of time in Birmingham, but I'm based in Huntsville still. I was a reporter here for a lot of years back when we had the newspapers.
How long were you with the Huntsville Times?
I was with the Huntsville Times before we became AL.com, probably 15 years, 17 years, something like that.
Okay. Okay. When one of the reasons I asked, well, first because I've never asked you that, and you're on the show, so I wanted to find out. The other reason, John Archibald recently wrote a column, and I didn't check on it before I came in here, so I can't quote him, but he took up the flag for Birmingham in this culture debate
Yeah.
over the
Okay.
two best. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I showed him around Huntsville on that one.
See, I need to have him on the show, but I need someone from Huntsville also who will debate Huntsville versus Birmingham somehow. I've really been wanting to do that. Are you the guy?
I suppose I would be. I was the editor he referred to as a crusty cuss in that article.
See, I wasn't going to call you out for that.
I was flattered.
Yeah, you kind of like that. You like being a
John
curmudgeon.
Archibald calls you crusty. That's a compliment.
That's right. Challen, thanks so much for sharing all this with us. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Ike.
It was quite a 2024, and thanks to everybody out there for listening to us. We'll be back here again bright and early Monday. Until then, y'all come by and see what we're doing on the internet at al.com.